We all know that person who complains about the job that they're on, but they stay on it for years and years. And every mention of that job, they complain about it and say how they plan on leaving it. And they've been on it for the last 15 years. In the last 13 years, they've been complaining and never made a move. We all know of that relationship that can sometimes be violent. And we'll have a woman who complains about the bad treatment she's getting from her man. He's putting his hands on her. He's verbally abusing her, emotionally abusing her, psychologically abusing her. He's bringing her diseases, making babies outside of the relationship or the marriage, whichever way it may be, but because it's supposed to be a committed relationship. Yet, she goes back to him. And then you don't want to hear her call you up in the middle of the night complaining because you're tired of hearing her complain because that's all she does and never makes a move. So it drains you. We all know about that. The person who says they want to lose weight and go to the gym, and they just, every year they get bigger and bigger and more unhealthy. It just wears you out. So I asked the question, and this is the title of this piece: are you addicted to familiar suffering? Why you keep returning to the same pain and patterns? And it's pathetic because that's what most do. And me personally, unless you're really going to make a move and do something, I don't want to hear it because I'm trying to levitate. I'm trying to break through to the new atmosphere of my life. And I'm very enthusiastic because I keep my peace and protect it at all times. But most people, they wake up every single day believing they're making conscious decisions about their life. They think the choices they make are based on logic, maturity, experience, and personal desire. But the truth is much darker than that. Many of us are not living from conscious choice at all. We're living from invisible programming that was installed long before we understood what was happening to us. We are reacting more than we are creating. We are surviving more than we are living, and we don't realize it. Right now, your mind is predicting your future based on your past. Your brain is constantly scanning old experiences, old fears, old wounds, and old failures, then using them as instructions for how you should behave today. Ain't that sick? But for most of us, it's true. That means many people are not responding to the present moment honestly. They're responding to emotional ghosts from years ago. Every fear, every insecurity, every excuse, every hesitation has been wired into the nervous system like software running silently in the background. The frightening part is that most people never even question the script. They think their limitations are their personality. They think their emotional pain is just who they are. They think their struggles are proof that they were simply born this way. But the reality is that much of what people call personality is actually conditioning. It's repetition. It's learned behavior reinforced over time until it becomes automatic. A child who grows up constantly criticized may become an adult terrified of visibility. A child raised around instability may become an adult addicted to control. A person repeatedly rejected may eventually stop risking connection altogether. The behavior begins as protection, but over time, it hardens into identity. The mask becomes the face. The survival strategy becomes the lifestyle. And this is why so many people remain trapped. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack dreams, not because they're lazy. They remain trapped because they're trying to build a new life while still operating from an old identity. They're trying to create freedom with a mind that was trained for survival. And this is deep. You got to really think about this. Most people believe the brain is designed to help them achieve goals. That sounds good in motivational speeches, but it is not entirely true. The brain's deeper mission is consistency. Your mind works overtime to keep your behavior aligned with the identity you already believe about yourself. That's the absolute truth. This is why people can want success while simultaneously destroying every opportunity that could lead them there. The brain protects familiarity even when familiarity is painful. If suffering has become emotionally familiar, then suffering begins to feel safe. That is why people return to toxic relationships, just like I mentioned earlier. That is why people sabotage growth. That is why people shrink themselves in rooms where they should stand tall. The nervous system often chooses familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom because predictable pain feels safer than uncertain change. People blame themselves for failing to maintain new habits. They call themselves weak. They say they lack discipline. But the deeper issue is usually identity conflict. If someone still secretly believes they are unworthy, incapable, unattractive, broken, or undeserving, then eventually their behavior will return to match that belief no matter how motivated they temporarily become. This is why temporary motivation changes almost nothing. Motivation creates emotional excitement, but identity creates behavioral consistency. You can write goals on mirrors all day long, but if your internal identity rejects these goals, the system eventually corrects itself. The thermostat always returns to its default setting. This is why people lose weight, then gain it back. This is why people finally find love, then destroy it. That is why people make money and unconsciously create chaos that drains it away. The identity underneath the achievement was never transformed. The external changed while the internal remained untouched. Most of the beliefs controlling people today were formed before they even understood what beliefs were. Childhood is one of the most psychologically absorbent periods in human life. During those early years, the brain takes in information without much filtering. Statements from authority figures become emotional truth. Repeated emotional experiences become mental laws. If a child repeatedly hears criticism, they may conclude they are not enough. If they grow up watching struggle and limitation, they may conclude success belongs to other people. If they experience betrayal, abandonment, humiliation, or emotional neglect, the nervous system begins creating defensive strategies designed to avoid future pain. The tragedy is that many of these conclusions are formed by children who do not yet possess the emotional maturity to interpret situations accurately. Yet, those childhood conclusions continue controlling adult behavior decades later. A single emotional wound can quietly shape an entire future. Many people are still operating from emotional instructions written by younger versions of themselves who are frightened, confused, powerless, and emotionally overwhelmed. The adult body grew up, but the nervous system continued protecting old wounds like they were still active threats. This is why some people panic when success finally arrives. That is why others push people away when intimacy becomes real. The nervous system is trying to prevent old pain from happening again. The brain is not asking, "What do I want now?" It is asking, "What hurt me before and how do I avoid it?" People often think discomfort means they are failing. That is one of the biggest lies ever told in the self-help world. Discomfort during change is not proof something is wrong. It's proof something is unfamiliar. The brain loves efficiency. It creates neural pathways through repeated behavior, repeated thoughts, and repeated emotional responses. The more often a pattern is repeated, the more automatic it becomes. Eventually, the behavior requires little conscious effort because the nervous system has memorized it. That means Even destructive behaviors can feel natural simply because they have been repeated for years. The brain would rather repeat a familiar pattern than create a new one because familiar patterns conserve energy. This is why changing your life feels exhausting at first. You are literally forcing the brain to build new pathways while abandoning old ones. People misunderstand this resistance and call it failure. In reality, it is neurological friction. The mind is resisting because it has not yet accepted the new pattern as safe, normal, or predictable. That resistance is part of the process, not proof you should stop. Real transformation is not emotional hype. It is repetition with awareness. Every time a person chooses a healthier response, they strengthen a new neural pathway. Every time they interrupt an old destructive pattern, they weaken the old one. The brain changes through repeated experience, not temporary inspiration. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Dramatic emotional motivation fades quickly, but repeated aligned behavior gradually rewires the nervous system. Transformation is biological before it becomes visible. Many people believe they are making rational decisions, but unresolved emotional pain is often operating beneath the surface, directing everything. The nervous system remembers humiliation. It remembers betrayal. It remembers rejection. It remembers abandonment. And once the brain links certain experiences to emotional danger, it begins building protection patterns. The problem is that those protection patterns continue long after the original danger has passed. A person who is emotionally abandoned may become emotionally unavailable. A person repeatedly criticized may fear visibility. Someone hurt deeply by trust may sabotage intimacy before vulnerability can fully develop. These patterns are not random. They are survival responses that were never updated. The nervous system learned a painful lesson and built an entire behavioral strategy around avoiding similar pain in the future. The issue is that many of these protective behaviors eventually become self-destructive. The same walls that once protected someone from pain now block them from connection, growth, opportunity, and peace. The survival mechanism outlives the danger. This is why awareness alone does not automatically create change. Many intelligent people fully understand their patterns intellectually, yet continue repeating them emotionally. That's because unresolved pain lives deeper than logic. It lives in the nervous system itself. People love talking about discipline because it sounds powerful, but environment quickly shapes behavior more consistently than motivation ever will. Human beings are heavily influenced by what surrounds them every day. Your environment affects your thinking, your emotions, your habits, your focus, your energy, and even your standards. The people around you influence what feels normal. The spaces you spend time in influence your actions. The systems around you either support growth or strengthen destruction. Most people are trying to use willpower to fight environments that are actively training them to fail. They're trying to stay focused while surrounded by distraction. They're trying to stay positive while surrounded by negativity. They're trying to heal while remaining emotionally connected to the same environments that wounded them. Behavior becomes easier when the environment supports it. This is why structure matters. This is why boundaries matter. This is why distance from chaos matters. Transformation becomes far more sustainable when the environment aligns with the identity a person is trying to build. Many people are exhausting themselves because they believe struggle itself is proof of progress. But true intelligence is not making transformation harder than it needs to be. It's designing life in a way that supports the behaviors you want to become natural. Every destructive pattern has a belief underneath it. Every limitation has an internal story supporting it. Most people never investigate those stories because they have repeated them for so long that they mistake them for reality itself. A person who constantly procrastinates may secretly believe failure is inevitable. Someone who settles for less may believe they do not deserve more. A person terrified of success may unconsciously associate visibility with danger because of earlier emotional experiences. The most dangerous beliefs are the ones people never question. They become invisible rules shaping every decision from the background. And because the brain constantly looks for evidence supporting existing beliefs, people unknowingly create lives that reinforce the very limitations they are trying to escape. Isn't that sad? That is why transformation requires brutal honesty. A person may ask themselves difficult questions. What do I truly believe about myself? What emotional conclusions did I form years ago that are still controlling me today? What invisible beliefs are shaping my behavior behind the scenes? Are you able to ask these questions? And are you able to truthfully answer them? Once the root belief is exposed, behavior suddenly begins making sense. Self-sabotage is rarely random. It is usually the logical outcome of an invisible belief system operating beneath awareness. Most people think identity changes after results appear. They believe that once they become successful, healthy, loved, respected, or confident, then they will finally feel different internally. But psychology shows the opposite is usually true. Lasting transformation begins when identity changes first. Behavior becomes consistent only when it aligns with who a person believes they are. The external world rarely changes permanently until the internal world shifts first. That means the real battle is not about forcing behavior. It's about becoming emotionally aligned with a new identity before external evidence fully appears. A person must stop waiting for permission from the outside world before deciding who they are. When identity changes, behavior stops feeling like punishment. Healthy actions become expressions of self rather than forced discipline. The new behavior no longer feels fake because it matches the internal self-image being built. This is why real transformation feels different from temporary performance. A person pretending to change constantly needs accountability and motivation. A person who is truly changed behaves differently even when nobody is watching because the behavior reflects who they believe themselves to be. The world responds differently when someone finally stops asking for permission to become who they were always capable of being. The moment a person stops living from old wounds and starts living from conscious identity is the moment their entire life begins shifting in ways they never thought possible. This is an absolute truth, whether you believe it or not. Most people are not trapped by lack of potential. They are trapped by unconscious programming. They are living inside identities they never consciously chose. They're following emotional instructions written by pain, fear, rejection, shame, and survival. The greatest prison is not physical limitation. It's psychological conditioning mistaken for truth. Once a person realizes that many of their patterns were learned rather than permanent, a new possibility opens. What was conditioned can be reconditioned. Never forget that. But transformation requires honesty most people avoid. It requires confronting the beliefs, wounds, and emotional patterns operating beneath the surface. It requires recognizing that motivation alone will never overpower identity. The brain can change. The nervous system can heal. Old patterns can weaken. New pathways can be formed. But none of it happens accidentally. It happens through awareness, repetition, emotional regulation, intentional environments, and the decision to stop worshiping an old identity that no longer deserves control over your future. The moment you stop waiting for the outside world to tell you who you are allowed to become and finally decide for yourself, everything changes. That's not where transformation ends. That is where it truly begins. You know, several times in my life, I've utilized this principle before I even actually knew how to break it down and know how it was to be explained as I just did. But I always knew that transformation begins from within. You know, down through the years when I was involved in weightlifting and bodybuilding and other athletics, I trained many people back in the 80s when I was competing because they were impressed by the way I looked. But it wasn't just about the way I looked, it was my mental approach. And so there was a young lady, it was back in 1981, she walked into the gym and she gravitated toward me. And she liked the way I approached things in my training. She could see the difference because you can go into a gym and if you know how to train correctly, it's the little things that tell you if the person is training correctly with each movement, because each movement has to be executed exactly a certain way. So she was smart enough to know this, and she felt bad about the extra weight that she had on. And I told her, the minute you make up your mind to stick to the schedule of training, to stick to that regimen of training, to see yourself in the end result that you desire to reach, your goal, until you do that, it's not going to happen. If you submit to what you have to do and see yourself that way from now, you are already that now. Of course, 2 days of training or a month of training is not going to happen overnight. What I'm saying is something deeper. When you make up your mind to become that from within, you are that right now. You just have to go through the motions. And I don't mean going through the motions like just half-heartedly working in the gym. No, you go full force. But you have to put the work in. Just like a person who builds a house. How are you going to build a house without any blueprint, without any desire for a finished product that you can already see in your mind? And so no matter what happened to you before, maybe you tried to build a house with no plan and felt you were a failure, but you weren't a failure, you just didn't have a plan. You're not a failure, maybe you didn't follow through with the plan that you eventually had. But as long as you can see the end result, as long as you can plan, you will always be successful. And this is why, once again, I have to thank my parents for wiring me a certain way to make me basically unbeatable. In anything that I seek to do, I am going to win. No matter how many times people try to knock me down, I'm always going to come back. It takes time, but you'll always come back. It's not a matter of believing in yourself. You have to know in yourself. You see, I don't know much about cars, but if you take a vehicle with a weak engine and match it up with a muscle car with a strong engine, we know that muscle car is going to beat that weaker engine vehicle in a race on the racetrack. Why? Because we know what's under the hood. Some people are caught up in the loop of believing they are their failures. I'm not like that, and I don't have failures. I have learning experiences that make me better so that I don't repeat that experience again, and I upgrade my attack and come back stronger, because what people call a problem has a solution. I don't say I have problems. I may have a challenge, and there's a solution for the challenge, because every challenge has an answer. And if you look at it like a challenge, you'll realize that you're a champion and you have the wherewithal internally to overcome that challenge. I don't have problems. I have challenges. And every challenge I've had, I've discovered the way to surmount that challenge, like climbing a mountain. Even if you don't climb the mountain, you can go around the mountain. You can dig under the mountain, but you can get around that mountain some way. And that's the testimony of my life, because I'm not a famous person. But for the people that know me, they know that if I was not built this way, I would be in a crazy house somewhere, or I'd be depressed and partaking in substances or maybe locked up. But no. And I know my successes. They may not be where I have $50 million, but what I have on the inside and knowing in myself is worth more than $50 million. So you have to know this about yourself. Take the smaller victories that you've had and build on them. But understand that the patterns that you indulge in that were formed in you from when you were younger, that's not you. And your brain will fight to keep things the same way as it always has been. No, you got to break that. And you have to be disciplined enough to create new neural pathways so that becomes normal. Me doing these shows and doing these podcasts, I've been doing this for over 25 years. That is so established in me, it's not going to stop. So I laugh at people who may try to discourage or compete. And here's the other thing. When you're reestablishing yourself, don't look to compete with anybody else. It's not going to work. Like, people have come to me and say, hey, man, Lance, this YouTuber is getting more hits than you, man, so-and-so. Listen, I said, listen, it's cyclical online, who watches your content and who doesn't. But you know what? Nobody is going to beat me being the best LanceScurv, aka LanceScurvX, that's on this planet. And as long as I think that way, I can never lose because I am unique. I was made in a special way. Sometimes you get overlooked because of the trends of the world, but continue being yourself and you never have to reinvent who you are at the core as long as your habits are bringing you success. Even when the world doesn't see it, never change from being who you are in that respect at the core on a positive level. Sometimes things get slower, sometimes they pick up. Look at the stock market. Look at anybody who's in business. You see what I mean? So that's how I look. I'm steady with this thing. I can't be anybody else, and know what I try. I love being me. You should love being you, but you should also look within, challenge yourself, and change those patterns that have kept you in the same positions, the same relationships, the same mindsets that you've been in that have not yielded any success for you. It's all about positivity and introspection. Changing your hair color, buying a new outfit, switching up a car that you bought last year thinking it's going to make your life better, whatever. Running away and going to a different country is not going to change the internal you until you attack the eternal you. I've observed people who brought their old funky ways to Ghana thinking it's going to change them. And they put on the dashikis and the ankhs and they change your name. They come off whatever, and it's the same funky stuff on the inside. No change at all, only external. And the insecurities that they brought from America. And that goes in any situation. Anyway, I hope you got something from this. That's what was on my mind. Thank you for supporting the platform with your presence. I truly appreciate it. I like to go deep in human nature. I mean, other people want to talk about what's trending just to get hits. And, you know, I can talk about things, but I like to go deep and build a foundation of things that can help people get better and things that I've learned. How am I going to downgrade myself if I've learned some deep things and keep it shallow and keep it hollow and keep it low vibrational? I can't do that. If people want low vibrational content, there's enough of it out here. I want to go higher, and I want to leave behind something before my time is up on this earth that can help other people. That's the true validation, if it can help other people long after I'm gone. Anyway, do know that I love you all, those who are positive and those who are not looking to hurt anybody for selfish gain. But as long as you're positive and looking to make yourself better, I'm with you. And that's why I put out this type of energy every time I speak, right? I'm on to the next one. LanceScurv out. It's always a pleasure. Leave your comment and let me know that you're here and what you think about what was just shared. I appreciate that, and it motivates me to continue to keep going on. And make sure, once again, to go to LanceScurvX.com and sign up with your email address. It's free. That way we can have a direct relationship without being shadow banned by these social media platforms that are run and ruled by certain people who don't want to see our connection and relationship. Okay? Take care. Much love, everybody. Peace.